The universe had underestimated them. For centuries, humanity was considered weak, primitive even, clinging to the edges of the stars while other civilizations soared in the vastness of space. They thought us fragile. They thought our minds, our wills, were nothing more than pale imitations of their own. But when the psychic aliens came, when they thought they could bend humanity to their will, they discovered something they could never have predicted. They were wrong. In the cold void of space, the Artel, an ancient species with abilities far beyond anything humanity had ever encountered, sought to enslave Earth. They were mind-benders, capable of controlling thoughts, manipulating memories, and crushing wills with a mere thought. To them, humans were little more than insects to be crushed underfoot. For decades, Earth had remained untouched, hidden from the stars, while human civilization, still in its infancy in comparison to the galactic powers, struggled with its own survival. But the Artel had come, their ships breaking through the atmosphere like a swarm of locusts, their psychic pulses stretching across the planet, searching for any minds to dominate. They had a plan, to enslave Earth and use it as a stepping stone for their conquest of the galaxy. But humanity wasn't ready to kneel. Commander Alara Hawk stood at the helm of the Vanguard, a sleek, weaponized ship now known across the galaxy as the ship that defied the psychic aliens. As the leader of the small but fierce human resistance, she was the first to realize that humanity wasn't just fighting for survival. They were fighting for their soul. Alara had once been a military strategist, skilled in traditional combat tactics, but the invasion forced her to rethink everything. The Artel weren't like any enemy Earth had ever fought before. They didn't need weapons or ships. They had minds, unfathomably powerful minds. And yet, Alara had seen something the Artel had missed. Humans had an untapped resilience, a strength beyond logic or reasoning. It was the human spirit, impossible to predict, nearly impossible to control. And it was about to become the deadliest weapon in the galaxy. As the invasion of Earth intensified, Alara's resistance grew. But it wasn't just about strategy or technology, it was about psychology. She had to adapt to the aliens' methods, harnessing the unique, unpredictable nature of humanity's resistance to the Artel's psychic control. They fought back with every tool available. Neural disruptors, weapons designed to block psychic interference, and memory shields that created barriers around human minds, protecting them from psychic intrusion. But as the Artel grew more desperate, they intensified their attacks, pushing humanity to its absolute limits. Inside the Resistance's makeshift headquarters, Alara pored over the data. She watched the reports of each battle, studied the Artel's moves. They were systematic, cold, calculating. They used their psychic abilities to create chaos, to make humans doubt their own minds, twist their memories, and fragment their emotions. The war had become a battle for identity, for mind and soul. But humanity's unpredictability was a weapon the Artel hadn't counted on. The war raged on, humanity fighting back against the relentless psychic assaults. Earth had become a battleground, with each city in ruins, with a dozen failed psychic assaults. The Artel never understood the human will. They believed that their mental control could break Earth's spirit, force them into submission. But what the Artel didn't know, what they couldn't fathom, was that humanity's strength lay in its flaws. It was in their ability to feel, to dream, to create chaos from nothing, and to fight back with rage, love, and hope. It was in their defiance. Commander Hawk had the privilege and burden of seeing this firsthand. She had fought in the trenches, in the war rooms, and in the minefields. The Artel had targeted her, tried to control her, but they couldn't. She was the key. The Resistance, knowing that humanity would never be able to fight psychic power with power alone, took the fight to the mind. The first victory came when Alara found the key to the Artel's power. In a brutal mission, Alara and her team infiltrated an Artel stronghold, hidden beneath the ruins of a collapsed city. There they found a consciousness-shifting device, an artifact that amplified the Artel's psychic abilities. It allowed them to control minds on an entire planetary scale. "This is how they did it," Alara whispered, her heart pounding as she stared at the ancient machine. "This is what made them gods." But Alara wasn't about to let them be gods any longer. In an action-packed sequence of guerrilla warfare, Alara's team hacked the device and turned it against the Artel, using their own weapon to sever the psychic links that had dominated Earth's population. But the consequences were immediate. The Artel's response was swift and brutal. They retaliated with everything they had, an entire fleet of warships descending upon Earth, their weapons designed to obliterate everything in their path. Alara knew this was it, the final confrontation. Humanity had one last chance to fight back and reclaim their freedom, but at what cost? As the Federation's forces bore down on Earth's last strongholds, Alara and her team launched their final assault. The once defiant cityscapes were now reduced to battlegrounds of fire and ash. Humanity was exhausted, battered, but not broken. "We are not their slaves," Alara shouted into the comms, her voice carrying across the battlefield. "We are human, and we will fight until our last breath." The battle that followed was more than a fight for survival. It was a fight for the very soul of humanity. The Ardal, with all their power, could not comprehend the depth of what they were facing. They attacked, using every psychic weapon in their arsenal, but humanity had adapted. And humanity fought back. The final confrontation came in the heart of the Ardal's flagship, an intense battle where Alara personally confronted the leader of the Ardal, a creature so ancient and powerful that it seemed beyond reach. They faced off in a battle of wits and wills, minds colliding in a psychic duel unlike anything the universe had ever witnessed. "You are nothing," the Ardal leader hissed, their voice like the cold of space itself. "I am the beginning, you are just dust." But Alara stood firm. "No," she said, her mind pushing back. "We are humanity, and you underestimated us." With a final surge of will, Alara struck, the psychic connection severed. The Ardal leader screamed, a sound of pure rage before it collapsed. The psychic hold over Earth was broken. Humanity had won, the war was over, but the price had been steep. Earth lay in ruins, its cities shattered, its people broken, but they had survived, and they had won. As Alara stood on the ruins of a once great city, she could feel the weight of their victory pressing down on her. The universe would never see humanity the same way again. "We did it," Juno said, his voice heavy with both relief and sorrow. "We've taken back our future." But Alara knew the truth. This is only the beginning, they will come again. But for now, humanity was free, and that freedom was more powerful than anything the Ardal or any other species could ever understand. The dust had barely settled on Earth's shattered surface when the true consequences of humanity's victory began to take shape. The Federation, their shadowy, omnipresent rulers, had underestimated humanity's capacity for defiance. But now, the galaxy knew something they had long ignored. Humans were no longer the helpless, isolated species they once were. Alara stood at the edge of the command center, her eyes watching the data streams flash across the screen. Earth's first victory against the psychic invaders had sent ripples across the galaxy. The truth of what had happened, the death of the Ardal leader, the fall of the psychic empire, spread like wildfire. But the galaxy had already begun to take notice of the humans. Some saw them as heroes, others as a growing threat. And some simply saw them as wildcards. "What's our next move, Commander?" Juno asked, his voice cutting through her thoughts. He was standing behind her, his hands clasped behind his back, the exhaustion of the long battle still visible on his face. The weariness was there, but so was the glimmer of something else, determination. Alara turned toward him, her gaze meeting his. The fire that had burned in her since the beginning of the war hadn't diminished. If anything, it was stronger now. "We rebuild," she said quietly, but the weight of the words wasn't lost on anyone in the room. "But not just Earth. The galaxy is changing. The Federation might be weakened, but there are still forces out there who will try to pick up the pieces they left behind." The war had taught her one undeniable truth. Freedom came with a price. The moment the psychic chains had shattered, the galaxy had begun to take sides, and the sides were no longer just defined by old borders. Now every species, every faction was eyeing humanity with a mix of awe and suspicion. Humanity had won its first battle, but the real war was only beginning. Alara and Juno made their way through the rebuilt corridors of the Vanguard, the new flagship of the Resistance, retrofitted with both Federation technology and human ingenuity. The ship was a symbol of the new era, a beacon that would either unite or ignite chaos throughout the galaxy. The humans who had once fought as pawns were now ready to stake their claim in the stars. "The Tesserans are requesting a meeting," Juno reported, his expression unreadable. "They want to discuss the future of the galaxy, or so they say." Alara paused, her brow furrowing at the mention of the Tesserans. They had been the unexpected allies in humanity's fight against the Ardal, but trusting them was another matter. The Tesserans were powerful, and while they had helped humanity, their true motives were still a mystery. What did they want now? "Set up the meeting," Alara said, her voice firm. "But keep the details quiet. We don't need to walk into any more traps." Juno nodded, disappearing down the hallway to carry out her orders. Alara turned her attention to the tactical displays on the wall, maps of the galaxy, now dotted with new territories, some liberated from the Federation's grasp, others barely holding on. The Tesserans aren't the only ones watching us, Alara muttered, her eyes scanning the display. Others will come, and not all of them will be friendly. Hours later, Alara stood at the heart of the Vanguard's briefing room, staring across the table at the Tesseran delegation. The Tesseran commander, Azar, was flanked by two of his soldiers, silent, watchful. The atmosphere was tense, the weight of the meeting pressing down on Alara's shoulders. "Commander Hawk," Azar said, his voice deep and measured, "I trust you understand the gravity of the situation." Alara nodded, her posture straight as she met Azar's gaze. "We won the war, but that doesn't mean peace. The Federation will rebuild. You know that as well as I do." Azar's lips twitched into something resembling a smile, though it was hard to tell whether it was genuine or a calculated move. "The Federation is weakened, but they will not lie down. They are already regrouping." Alara's fists clenched at the thought of the Federation. "What's your angle, Azar?" Her voice was sharp. "You helped us, but you didn't do it out of charity. What do you want from us?" Azar's eyes flickered. "What I want is simple, Commander. We want humanity to help us fight a war that has been brewing long before the Federation's fall. The galaxy is not just the Federation's to control. There are others, rival factions, ancient civilizations, that will seek to fill the void left by their collapse." Alara's mind raced. "You want us to be your soldiers." "Not soldiers," Azar corrected, his voice cold, as if the word was beneath him. "We want you to be partners in a new order. You've already proven that humans are capable of extraordinary things. Together, we can reshape the galaxy." Alara felt a flicker of doubt in her chest, but she kept her face neutral. "And what do we get out of it?" Azar's eyes darkened. "You get survival. You get a seat at the table of the new galaxy. But know this, your enemies will come from all sides. If you want to protect Earth, if you want to secure your future, you will have to fight for it. But this time, you will fight with us, and with those who have the power to shift the balance of power in the galaxy." There it was, the ultimatum. The Tesserans weren't offering charity. They were offering alliance, with the implication that refusal would leave humanity vulnerable. "You're asking for too much," Alara said, her voice steady, though a part of her felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her chest. "We've fought alone. You want us to fight under your banner now." Azar's eyes gleamed, but his expression remained inscrutable. "Not under our banner, Commander, under your own banner. You're not just human, you're the galaxy's new force. The universe will change with you, whether you're ready or not." Alara stood alone on the observation deck of the Vanguard, looking out at the stars. The ship had left Earth behind, its surface now a distant memory. In her heart, she could still hear the echoes of the battles fought, the lives lost, and the price paid for survival. The Federation had been brought to its knees, but that didn't mean peace. The galaxy was a vast, complex network of factions, each vying for control, and now humanity was at the center of it all. The stakes had never been higher. As the Tesseran fleet drifted silently nearby, Alara's thoughts returned to Azar's words. The Tesserans might have saved humanity, but they were also using them. The price of their survival would not be paid in credit, it would be paid in blood. But even as doubt gnawed at her, Kala knew one thing: humanity had changed. They were no longer the weak, fragile species the universe once thought them to be. They had defied the odds. They had stared down the Federation, and they had won. Now they would carve out their place in the stars. The question remained, what would they become? The galaxy had never felt so small. Humanity's victory against the Ardal had sent shockwaves across the stars, but with the fall of one power came the rise of others. The Tesserans had been the first to extend an offer of alliance, but there were others, alien factions, powerful and enigmatic, watching the humans with growing interest. Alara stood at the command center of the Vanguard, her eyes fixed on the tactical display that showed an array of shifting galactic maps. The Tesserans had sent them a list of potential allies, species that had quietly observed humanity's rise from the shadows, waiting to see if Earth's war was just a fluke, or if humanity had the true resolve to survive in the stars. Juno entered the room quietly, his face filled with a mix of fatigue and determination. He had been by her side from the very beginning of this conflict, and they had both grown stronger in the crucible of battle. But now, in the quiet aftermath of victory, a new war was brewing, one that would determine if humanity would truly become the force that Azar believed them capable of. "What's the status on the outposts?" Alara asked, her voice steady, but the weight of their uncertain future hung heavy in the air. "We've got responses," Juno replied, glancing at the console. "The Uroth, the Rawl, even the Zartok, they're all making moves." His voice dropped. "But the Federation is mobilizing too. We're not the only ones making alliances." Alara's heart skipped. The Federation might be on the defensive, but they weren't defeated. They never would be. The moment they realized humanity was no longer their pawn, they would strike back with a vengeance. The galaxy was on the edge of chaos. "Then we fight," Alara said, her voice hardening with purpose. "Not just to survive, but to prove we are worthy of this galaxy." The console in front of them buzzed, and a new transmission came through. The Tesserans were ready to move forward. The Tesserans weren't the only ones interested in humanity's rise. As Alara and Juno prepared for the next phase of their alliance with the Tesserans, the unknown enemy that had been lurking in the shadows made their move. The Vanguard's comms lit up with static as a cold, mechanical voice filled the air. "Commander Hawk, we are the Rawl. You have stirred the hornet's nest." The Rawl were ancient enemies of the Tesserans, a species with technology so advanced it seemed indistinguishable from magic. They had never directly interfered with human affairs before, until now. The Rawl were not only threatening Earth, but they were also sending a message to the entire galaxy. "We are not your allies, human. You will pay for your insolence," the Rawl's voice continued, its final words ringing out with malicious finality. "Your victory is nothing more than a death sentence. Prepare yourselves." Alara's breath caught in her chest. The Federation was one thing, but the Rawl, they were a force of nature in their own right, capable of destroying entire fleets without breaking a sweat. Their threat was clear, their power undeniable. "They'll come for us, but they'll find us ready," Alara said, her voice hardening as she turned to face Juno. Without warning, the Vanguard was rocked by a sudden barrage of energy blasts, shaking the entire ship. The Rawl had launched their assault. The shields flared up, absorbing most of the attack, but the impact was enough to send tremors throughout the ship. "All hands to battle stations," Alara shouted, her voice booming through the ship's comms. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers. Engage the Rawl." The ship lurched as Juno quickly adjusted their trajectory, sending the Vanguard into a spiral as the Rawl ships closed in. Their massive warships, sleek and almost organic in design, loomed in the distance like a swarm of predatory beasts. The Vanguard wasn't fast enough, and the Rawl ships were targeting them with precision. "We can't outrun them, Commander," Juno shouted, his hands flying across the controls. "We need to disable their weapons now." "Focus on their main ship," Alara ordered. "It's the Rawl's flagship. If we take that down, the rest will fall back." The Vanguard's weapons systems hummed to life, and Alara steadied herself in her seat, watching the chaotic space battle unfold before her. They had no choice but to fight, no choice but to stand against the Rawl, who saw humanity as nothing more than a nuisance, an obstacle in their quest for dominance. "Target their engines," Alara yelled. "We need to cripple them now." Juno aimed the ship's cannons at the Rawl flagship, firing a series of devastating shots that tore through the alien vessel's outer hull. The ship shuddered, sparks flying from the consoles as the shields took a hit. "Direct hit, they're losing power," Juno shouted, his voice full of disbelief. "It's working." But the Rawl weren't backing down. In a final desperate move, their flagship released a massive pulse of energy that tore through space, its shockwave colliding with the Vanguard. The ship groaned as it was sent spiraling out of control, debris flying around them. "Brace for impact," Alara shouted as the ship careened toward a nearby asteroid field. The Vanguard hit the field with a violent crash, sending shocks through the entire vessel. For a split second, everything went black. The aftershock of the Rawl's assault left Alara dazed, but not defeated. When she came to, she found herself in the heart of the Vanguard's command center, surrounded by the hum of repair systems working to stabilize the ship. "Damage report," she asked, her voice hoarse but firm. "We're alive, Commander," Juno reported, his voice tight with exhaustion but laced with determination. "The ship's hull is intact, but it's going to take time to repair. We've lost shields and half our weapon systems. We're not in fighting shape yet." Alara nodded, though she knew the battle wasn't over. "We've got one shot left," she said. "We can't let the Rawl think they've won. We need to strike back now." As she stood, the room fell into an eerie silence. The galaxy was no longer just a distant dream. Humanity was in the thick of it, now playing the role of a force to be reckoned with. The Rawl had come, and they had learned the hard way that humanity was not a species to be underestimated. The next battle was already on the horizon. The Vanguard had barely recovered from the Rawl's assault when the news hit. The Federation wasn't just regrouping, they were coming for Earth. Their strategy was clear: crush humanity before it could rise from the ashes, take back the power they'd once controlled, and silence all who dared to oppose them. The Tesseran fleet was still coordinating with humanity's forces, but they were a scattered force, small compared to the might of the Federation. Kala had learned the hard truth. The Tesserans were powerful, but they weren't invincible. And now, they had to rely on human ingenuity to tip the scales. Inside the war room aboard the Vanguard, Alara and Juno stood at the front, facing a holographic display of the Federation's fleet. Their ships were massive, each one capable of wiping out entire planets with ease. Alara's heart raced as she studied their approach. She knew what was coming. They weren't just about to destroy humanity. The Federation had a message they wanted to send to the galaxy. "If we don't act now, Earth is lost," Alara said, her voice quiet but heavy. "The Federation will crush us if we try to fight them head-on." Juno looked at her, his expression grim. "So what do? We can't just give up." Alara turned back to the hologram. The Federation fleet was closing in on Earth's orbit, their weapons primed and ready. She could feel the weight of the entire galaxy pressing down on her. "We don't fight them conventionally. We fight them with everything we've learned. We use their underestimation of humanity against them." The tension in the room was palpable. The human resistance was vastly outnumbered, but Alara had a plan, one that would exploit the Federation's biggest mistake. They had thought humanity was weak. They had thought humanity was stupid. And now that miscalculation would cost them everything. The Federation's fleet loomed on the horizon, but Alara wasn't about to let their overwhelming force intimidate her. Humanity had something the Federation didn't: an unyielding will to survive. Kala and Juno had trained countless soldiers in the tactics of guerrilla warfare. But it wasn't just about brute force. It was about using their mind, their adaptability, their ability to turn any weakness into strength. The Federation hadn't expected Earth to come back swinging, but they would now. "We can't just rely on firepower," Alara said, packing in front of the war room table. "The Federation is too strong for that. We need to hit them where it hurts, in the shadows." Juno nodded, his eyes scanning the tactics laid out before them. "I'm with you, but we'll need more than just sabotage to make them flinch." Alara stopped packing and met his eyes. "We're going to unleash the truth. The one thing the Federation can't control, our humanity. The galaxy believes their narrative. They believe the Federation holds all the power. It's time to make them question that." Plan was set into motion with military precision. They would strike the Federation at the heart of their control, the communications network. Earth had long been a black hole of information in the galaxy, hidden from view by the Federation's manipulation. If they could break that, if they could show the galaxy what humanity had accomplished, it would be more than just a tactical victory. It would be a psychological war. But as Alara and her team embarked on their mission, they quickly realized that the Federation was prepared. A fleet of Federation warships had entered orbit around Earth's atmosphere, their weapons aimed down at the planet. The Federation wasn't just going to let them broadcast the truth, they would destroy them first. The Vanguard's weapon systems hummed to life as Alara stood at the bridge, watching the data come in. "They're not giving us any room to breathe," Juno said, his voice tight with urgency. "They're firing on the ground, and the communications relay isn't far from the city center." "We need to hold them off long enough," Alara said, her hands clenched at her sides. "Juno, I need you to keep the Federation off our tail while we get to the relay." The ship lurched as they maneuvered through incoming fire, the engines straining under the pressure. The battle had begun, but this time, humanity wasn't going to hide behind their shields. They were fighting for something bigger. "Here we go," Juno muttered as they plunged toward the surface of Earth, their ship now entering the war zone where Federation forces were turning the planet into a hellscape of energy beams and fire. On the ground, the battle was nothing short of chaotic. Alara's team, clad in armored suits, dashed through the broken streets of the ruined city, dodging blasts from Federation soldiers and alien war machines. Earth was a war-torn landscape, but in that destruction, Alara saw the last remnant of humanity's defiance, the spark that had survived centuries of oppression. They reached the communications relay in record time, but the Federation wasn't far behind. "Set the charges," Alara ordered, her voice steady despite the chaos. "We don't have much time." As her team set the explosives, the sound of Federation soldiers closing in filled the air. Alara turned, her eyes sharp as she assessed their chances. "We fight for the truth," she said, her voice filled with a calm, unshakable resolve. "And we fight for Earth." With a final push, the relay was destroyed, and the data that had been hidden for so long was released into the galaxy. The truth about Earth's history, the Federation's lies, everything humanity had fought for, it was all out there now. But just as the relay exploded in a brilliant flash, the Federation launched one final assault. The sky above Earth erupted with energy as the Federation forces sent wave after wave of attacks. They were coming for humanity with everything they had left. "Get to the ship now," Alara shouted as she led the way through the chaos. "It's not over yet." The battle was brutal. The Federation's final assault on Earth was relentless, but humanity's will was stronger. As the Tesserans and even some alien factions who had sympathized with Earth's plight rallied behind the human resistance, the Federation's control began to fracture. The truth had been broadcast. The Federation no longer held the power they once did. The galaxy, once ruled by fear and deception, was beginning to shift, its foundation rocked by the truth humanity had revealed. As the Federation's ships retreated, and the vanguard rose into space once again, Alara stood at the command center, staring out into the stars. She had led humanity to this moment, but she knew this victory wasn't just hers. It was humanity's. "We won," Juno said quietly beside her. "No," Alara corrected him softly, her eyes distant but resolute. "This is only the beginning. The Federation isn't gone. They're weakened, but there are still threats out there. The galaxy is ours to shape now." The universe had underestimated humanity before. But now no one would dare. The battle for Earth had been won, but the true cost of that victory was only beginning to reveal itself. The Federation, humiliated and crippled, had retreated into the shadows, licking its wounds, but it wasn't defeated. The galaxy was no longer the playground of the powerful few. It was a battlefield for control, a new era where humanity's place was yet to be determined. Alara Hawk stood at the Vanguard's bridge, her hands resting on the console, staring at the galaxy spread out before her. They had won the war on Earth, but the larger conflict had only just begun. The Federation was still out there, but now there were new forces to contend with, factions that had been biding their time, watching humanity rise. "They'll come for us again," Juno said, his voice grim as he stepped up beside her. His expression had darkened over the last few days, his mind heavy with the weight of their responsibility. "Not just the Federation," Alara replied, her tone steady but filled with the weight of an undeniable truth. "There are others, smarter, more dangerous, who will see humanity as a threat." The Vanguard hummed with life, the ship cutting through the stars at a blistering pace. They had just left the remnants of the Federation's stronghold, and now they were headed to the outer rim, the forgotten corners of the galaxy where the most dangerous of their new enemies resided. It was there that they would find the Tesserans' true purpose in this new alliance, and what they would ask from humanity next. The first of their new allies, the Tesserans, had promised aid, but Alara knew better than to trust them fully. They had their own interests, their own agenda, and the cost of alliance would be far steeper than anything they'd prepared for. They needed to understand the true implications of the galaxy's shifting balance. As the Vanguard approached the coordinates for the Tesseran meeting, the tension in the air thickened. The crew was on edge, knowing that this wasn't just another negotiation. This was about survival. Humanity had become the most unpredictable and dangerous species in the galaxy, and that made them enemies to many. "Commander Hawk," a voice crackled over the comms. "We've arrived at the Tesseran fleet's location. We've been given clearance to dock." "Understood," Alara replied, her hand tightening on the console. "Keep your eyes open, no surprises." As the ship docked with the Tesseran flagship, the stark contrast between humanity's gritty resistance ship and the pristine, polished interiors of the Tesseran vessel was jarring. The Tesserans were a race of calculated precision, their technology sleek and unfathomably advanced. It was clear they had the upper hand, but humanity had proven their adaptability, their ability to survive against all odds. Alara and Juno made their way to the central meeting hall. Inside, a small group of Tesseran officials waited, their faces as unreadable as ever. At the head of the table stood Commander Azar, the same figure who had helped them in their fight against the Artel. His eyes flickered with something, respect, or perhaps something more dangerous. "Commander Hawk," Azar greeted her with his usual reserved tone, though there was a certain gleam in his eyes. "I trust your victory has been satisfying." Alara kept her face neutral as she stepped forward. "Victory was just the beginning, Azar. We need to talk about what comes next. The Federation is still a threat, but there are others, rivals, hidden powers who are watching us." Azar's gaze never wavered. "Indeed, the galaxy has never been this unstable, and you, humanity, are now at the center of it. You've gained the attention of those who want to keep control of the galaxy for themselves. The question is, how will you use this power?" Alara's fists clenched at her sides. She had heard enough. "We fight for Earth, we fight for the truth, but we will not become pawns in anyone's game." Azar stepped down from his place, his demeanor still calm, but there was a certain weight to his words. "If you intend to continue down this path, Commander, you will face opposition from all sides. The Federation will not stop hunting you, and the Tesserans are not the only ones who have their own goals for Earth. I need to know that you are prepared to make the hard choices." Alara's eyes hardened. "We'll make the choices we have to, but we do it our way." The meeting with the Tesserans ended. The tension between Alara and Azar remained thick. There was no resolution, only the understanding that the galaxy was shifting beneath their feet. Humanity's victory had put them in a powerful position, but now they had to learn to navigate the web of alliances, threats, and enemies that had been set in motion. The next day, a new threat emerged. A transmission from the Zardoc, a warlike species from the outer sectors, came through. Their message was clear and ominous. "Humanity has claimed victory against the Federation," the voice crackled, a harsh, guttural language overlaying the alien tone. "But you will pay for your arrogance. The Zardoc do not forgive, and neither will we." Alara's eyes widened as she listened to the message. The Zardoc had been a relatively unknown force up until now, but they were known for their brutal tactics and their hatred of the Tesserans. If they were stepping into the fray, it meant they saw humanity as a new threat. "They're coming for us," Juno said, his voice grim, "and they'll bring an army with them." Alara turned toward the tactical display, her fingers dancing across the console. "They don't know what they've started. We've faced worse. We've faced the Federation, and now we'll face them." Vanguard's crew was on high alert as the Zardoc fleet moved into position, their warships massive and brutal in design. The Zardoc had no interest in diplomacy. They wanted Earth, or they wanted humanity erased from the stars. Alara stood at the helm, her heart pounding as the battle loomed ahead. The Federation was weak, but the Zardoc, they were something else entirely. Humanity had no choice but to face them head-on. "Prepare for battle," Alara shouted, her voice filled with fierce resolve. "This is our moment. We won't back down, not now, not ever." The warship's guns roared to life as the Zardoc closed in. Alara's mind raced as she quickly analyzed the situation. They had no time for hesitation. The Federation had underestimated humanity before. The Zardoc wouldn't make that mistake twice. The ships clashed, fire lighting up the void of space as energy blasts and weapons fire danced across the battlefield. Humanity was outnumbered, but Alara had one weapon the Zardoc couldn't predict, the unpredictability of the human spirit. The Zardoc warships loomed in the void like black monoliths, their massive forms casting shadows over the Vanguard and its fleet. The battle had already cost them dearly. The Vanguard's shields were flickering, and half of their weapons systems were down. The Zardoc were brutal in their assault, overwhelming their defenses with sheer firepower and relentless tactics. But Alara had seen this before, the Federation, the Artel, and now the Zardoc. They had all underestimated humanity. They had no idea what they were up against. The Vanguard's engines roared as it maneuvered between blasts, the crew working in synchronized chaos. Every moment felt like a lifetime, every decision a matter of life and death. Alara's heart was steady, her mind focused, but deep inside, she knew that this battle wasn't just about winning. It was about proving to the galaxy that humanity would not be crushed. "Commander, they're coming in fast," Juno's voice cut through the din of the bridge. Alara tightened her grip on the console, the dim lights of the battle flashing across her face. She trained for moments like this, but nothing prepared her for the sheer weight of the decision now in her hands. She wasn't just leading humanity to survival. She was leading them to the truth of their place in the galaxy. "Prepare the pulse disruptors," Alara barked, her voice cutting through the noise. We need to hit their command ship now. It's the heart of their fleet. The pulse disruptors were humanity's last line of defense, experimental weapons designed to throw the enemy's systems into chaos, scrambling their weapons and shields. The Zardoz ships were designed to be almost invulnerable to conventional attacks, but these disruptors targeted their weakest points, their control systems. Pulse disruptors online, the tactical officer confirmed, his fingers flying across the control panel. Ilara's fingers danced over the controls, guiding the ship into position. The Vanguard surged forward, hurtling toward the Zardoz command ship. The moment felt like a slow-motion nightmare, every breath heavy with the weight of what they were about to face. "Now, Ilara," Juno shouted, his voice desperate. With a sharp exhale, Ilara slammed her hand down on the firing control. The pulse disruptors fired with a deafening hum, sending a wave of energy through the Zardoz fleet. For a moment, everything went still. The Zardoz warships faltered, their systems sputtering as the pulse scrambled their control mechanisms. "Direct hit," Juno said, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. "Their shields are down." It was a momentary victory, but it was enough. Ilara turned to face the tactical officer. "Take the shot. All weapons, full power, take down their command ship." The Vanguard's remaining weaponry charged with blinding intensity. Energy blasts tore through space, ripping through the Zardoz fleet. The command ship, once a fortress of darkness, now shimmered with light as its hull buckled under the barrage. For a moment, it seemed like the battle had been won, but Ilara knew better than to think the Zardoz would go down without a fight. A second wave of Zardoz ships emerged from the shadows, their weapons locked onto the Vanguard. They weren't done. They were throwing everything they had left at humanity. Ilara's heart raced as she gave the order to evasively maneuver, but her eyes remained steady on the battlefield. They had come this far. They were not going to stop now. "Brace for impact," Ilara shouted as the ship lurched, the force of incoming fire shaking them to the core. For a moment, it felt as though the Vanguard would collapse under the pressure. The bridge's lights flickered as systems failed, but the crew fought on, working in tandem as the ship's hull screamed against the onslaught. "We're not done yet," Juno's voice cut through the chaos, his hands flying across the controls. "We're coming up on their secondary fleet. They're trying to flank us." Ilara's mind worked in overdrive. "Juno, get us to the asteroid field. We'll use the debris for cover. I'll coordinate with the Tesserans to launch the counterstrike." "You got it." The Vanguard veered toward the asteroid field, the massive chunks of rock and debris offering some cover from the barrage. It was a risky move. If they didn't make it through the field, the ship would be torn apart by the debris. But Ilara had no other choice. It was a gamble, but it was the best chance they had. The asteroid field was chaos, a violent storm of rock and metal flying past at incredible speeds. The Vanguard's crew worked together in a dance of coordination, weaving between the larger asteroids, narrowly avoiding collisions. The Zardoz fleet was in pursuit, but the debris field offered a tactical advantage. "They're losing us," Juno shouted, his fingers flying across the controls. "We're almost through." Ilara's grip tightened as she stared ahead. "Push through. We need to hit their secondary fleet with everything we have." With a final burst of speed, the Vanguard emerged from the asteroid field, and before the Zardoz had time to react, Ilara gave the order to fire. The remaining energy of the Vanguard's weapon systems surged forward, blasting through the Zardoz secondary fleet with a devastating force. The ships exploded in a shower of debris, their engines rupturing as the pulse disruptors finished their job. But it wasn't enough to destroy the entire fleet. The remaining ships regrouped and made one final charge straight at Earth. They weren't done yet. They had one last act of defiance to make. "Not today," Ilara said, her voice cold with determination. "We finish this." With a precise series of maneuvers, she guided the Vanguard into position, using the ship's remaining energy reserves to launch a final nuclear pulse charge directly at the heart of the Zardoz command fleet. The explosion was blinding. When the light faded, the Zardoz fleet was gone. The threat had been eradicated. Humanity had won, not just against the Federation, but against the entire galaxy. Ilara stood at the bridge, her breath coming in ragged gasps, the weight of victory heavy on her shoulders. "We did it," Juno whispered beside her. But Ilara didn't feel triumph. She felt something else, resolve. The battle for Earth was over, but the war for humanity's place in the stars had just begun. The battle was over. The Zartok had been crushed, and Earth's future was no longer under threat, at least for now. But as the dust settled, a new reality began to take shape. The war for humanity's survival had not only changed the balance of power in the galaxy, it had marked the dawn of a new era, one where humanity's role was no longer defined by weakness, but by power. Alara stood at the bridge of the Vanguard, looking out at the stars, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the tactical displays. The tension in her body had finally begun to ease, but her mind was still reeling from the weight of everything they had just accomplished. "We've done it," she thought, but the words tasted like ash. Victory had come at a steep cost. "Commander," Juno's voice broke her reverie. He was standing behind her, his hands still gripping the edges of the console, his gaze fixed on the galaxy ahead. "The Federation's network is still active. They're calling for reinforcements. This isn't over." Alara nodded, her gaze steady. The Federation may have lost their foothold on Earth, but they weren't finished. The galaxy was vast, and their network of spies, soldiers, and sleeper agents still stretched across the stars. "We can't let up," she said, her voice low but filled with unshakable resolve. "The moment we relax, they'll rebuild. We need to take the fight to them before they can regroup." The crew around them was silent, each member still processing the aftermath of the war. They had been the last line of defense for Earth, and now they were at the center of something much bigger. Humanity's place in the universe was no longer just a question of survival. It was a question of dominion. Alara's mind wandered to the Tesserans and their cryptic words. "We are your partners," Azar had said, but partnership in the harsh galaxy they now found themselves in was a word that was likely to be distorted and twisted. "We've made enemies," Juno said, his voice steady but tinged with uncertainty. "We've made enemies in the Federation, in the Zartok, and even among those who were once our allies." Alara's eyes flickered back to him. "I know, but we've also made a name for ourselves. The universe is watching, Juno. They'll either join us or they'll fall to us." The Vanguard's engines hummed quietly as it glided toward the heart of the galaxy. The Tesserans had called for an emergency summit, and the message was clear. Humanity was to be included in the negotiations for the future of the galaxy. But Alara knew that the invitation wasn't out of goodwill. The Tesserans had their own plans, and humanity was a tool they needed. As the ship entered the orbit of a massive space station, the Galactic Council's assembly point, Alara could feel the weight of the galaxy bearing down on her. This station was the center of the universe's political power, where every major faction and alien race had a seat at the table. "I don't like this," Juno muttered as they approached the station. "It feels like we're walking into a trap." Alara's jaw tightened. "I don't trust them either, Juno, but we have no choice. We need to show them we're more than just a side player in this galactic game." The council station loomed before them, its spires twisting upward like jagged teeth, a monument to galactic bureaucracy and power. As the Vanguard docked, a hush seemed to fall over the crew. This was it. Humanity had arrived. Inside the station, the atmosphere was charged with tension. Representatives from the Federation, the Tesserans, and a host of other factions filled the Grand Hall, their presence imposing. The air was thick with the scent of politics. Alliances formed in whispers, betrayals buried beneath layers of diplomacy. At the center of the room stood Azar, flanked by his Tesseran council, his expression unreadable. "Humanity has proven itself on the battlefield," Azar began, his voice smooth, authoritative. "But the question remains, will you now prove yourselves worthy of the stars?" Alara stepped forward, her eyes meeting those of the council members, the Federation's remaining dignitaries, the Rawl, and others who had once been distant spectators in the galaxy's unfolding conflict. She didn't flinch under their scrutiny. Humanity had already fought for its place. Now they had to claim it. "We've earned our place," Alara said, her voice cutting through the murmurs of the assembly. "We are no longer content to survive in the shadows. Humanity is ready to take its rightful place in this galaxy, and we will not bow to anyone." Her words echoed in the hall, and for a moment there was silence. Then, the tension broke as the first voice spoke up, a Rawl representative, their voice like the rasp of a blade cutting through the quiet. "You think you can challenge us, human?" The Rawl leader's eyes gleamed with malice. "You are nothing more than a speck in a vast, infinite universe, and you will learn that the cost of pride is more than you can afford." The council room was a battleground of words, each representative vying for control, for dominance in this new, fractured galaxy. The Tesserans remained silent for the most part, their inscrutable eyes watching the exchange with calculating precision. But Alara knew this wasn't just a diplomatic dance, it was a battle. Every word spoken, every gesture was part of a larger strategy. "The Rahl is right," one of the Federation's senior diplomats said, his tone dripping with condescension. "You have won a victory on your homeworld, but that doesn't mean you can dictate the future of the galaxy. You are untested, still unknown." Alara felt her pulse quicken. The Federation had always believed that humanity was nothing, fragile, weak, and unworthy of the stars. Now they had to face the fact that humanity was a force to be reckoned with. She leaned forward, her voice rising above the chatter. "We are not weak, we are not your slaves. Humanity may have been a footnote in the galaxy's history, but that's changing. We've proven ourselves on the battlefield, and we will prove ourselves here. You can either choose to fight with us or against us. But know this, we won't back down." The room was suddenly still, the weight of her words settling over everyone like a heavy fog. Alara's stance was resolute. Humanity had already proven their worth. Now it was time to show the galaxy who they really were. As the tension in the room built, a sudden interruption shattered the silence. The doors to the council chamber opened, and an unexpected figure stepped into the room. "Commander Hawk," a voice called out, unmistakable. Alara's eyes widened as she turned to face the newcomer, the leader of the Zartok, standing tall and unwavering. The room fell silent as the galaxy's most feared species took a step forward, their eyes locked on humanity. The room fell into an uneasy silence as the Zartok leader stepped forward, his presence almost overwhelming. His towering figure, clad in dark alien armor, commanded attention. His eyes, like burning embers, scanned the gathered representatives, and when they locked onto Alara, there was no mistaking the challenge in his gaze. "Commander Hawk," the Zardoc leader's voice rumbled, deep and resonant, carrying a weight of authority. "I've watched your species, how you've fought, how you've bled. You have earned your place in the stars." The words hung in the air, thick with something unspoken. Alara's heart raced as she took in the Zardoc's presence. They had been the final, unrelenting enemy humanity had fought against, and now here he was, extending an olive branch, or was it a trap? "What do you want, Zardoc?" Alara demanded, her voice cold and steady. She wouldn't be intimidated, not now, not after everything humanity had fought for. The Zardoc leader's lips curled into a grim smile, his posture relaxed despite the tension crackling in the air. "Not much, just your cooperation. You see, humanity has something we need, something we cannot take by force. You are not just fighters, you are survivors, and that makes you valuable to us." Alara narrowed her eyes, feeling the weight of his words. "Survivors of what, and why do we matter to you now?" The Zardoc stepped closer, his dark eyes gleaming with an intensity that sent a shiver down Alara's spine. "The Federation is no longer the threat it once was, but there are others, powers older and far more dangerous than anything you've faced. The galaxy is shifting, Commander, and humanity, your species, is now at the center of it." There was no turning back. Alara understood immediately what he was implying. The Zartok were no longer simply enemies, they were allies, whether humanity wanted them or not. "You want us to fight for you," Alara said, the words tasting like ash. "What do we get out of this?" The Zartok leader's eyes flashed. "Survival, Commander. If you don't stand with us, you will fall before them. There is no middle ground. The Federation may be gone, but the galaxy is full of predators waiting for a chance to strike." Juno stepped forward, his voice firm but his tone laced with suspicion. "Why should we trust you? You've never been our ally before. What makes you think we'll fight under your banner?" The Zartok leader gave a small nod, acknowledging the challenge in Juno's voice. "You don't trust me. You don't need to. But you will trust what you have seen, the power of the Zartok, and the power that humanity can wield when united." The room was silent, the weight of his words pressing down on every representative. Alara's gaze flickered to the others, the Tesserans, the remnants of the Federation, the smaller alien factions. All were watching, waiting. They knew the stakes. Humanity's decision would change the future of the galaxy. Alara's mind raced, running through every scenario. The Zartok had power, no doubt, but so did humanity. Could they risk their independence to secure peace with a species so merciless? Would they give up their chance at freedom for mere survival? The weight of their place in the galaxy pressed down on her. For the first time since Earth's victory, Alara felt the true magnitude of the responsibility that humanity now carried. "The Federation is broken, but we've just fought a war for freedom," Alara said, her voice steady as steel. "We didn't fight just to survive. We fought for control over our own fate, and we won't give that up, no matter what you promise us." The Zardok's expression didn't change, but there was a glimmer of something, respect, a hint of understanding in his gaze. "I understand, but know this, you have already made enemies. They will come for you, and there will be nowhere to hide." Zartok leader's words echoed in the room, leaving a tangible sense of foreboding hanging in the air. It was clear that the galaxy had changed forever, and humanity was no longer a passive player. They had earned their place, but the cost of that power was more than they had ever anticipated. Alara stood, her back straight, her eyes scanning the room. "We are not just going to survive," she said, her voice cutting through the heavy silence. "We are going to thrive. We will fight our own battles, and we will forge our own alliances. Humanity will take its place in the galaxy, but we will do it on our own terms." The room was still. Then slowly a murmur of agreement spread through the assembled factions. The Tesserans remained quiet, their unreadable expressions betraying little. But the others, the Rahl, the remnants of the Federation's former leaders, and the smaller species, began to nod, a slow ripple of support building across the room. "Humanity is right," the Rahl leader spoke up, his voice cold but approving. "The galaxy is shifting, and no one can remain neutral. But whether you fight with us or against us, you will have to choose. The power of the galaxy will no longer belong to a single force." Alara turned to face Juno, her eyes meeting his. The resolve in her gaze was unwavering. "We have our future to fight for, Juno, and this galaxy will know us by the strength of our will." Juno nodded, his expression reflecting the same fierce determination. "They'll either stand with us or fall before us." The meeting dissolved into murmurs of alliances and betrayals. Alara and Juno stood at the edge of the room, their future uncertain but full of potential. The choice they had made wasn't easy, but it had to be made. The galaxy had watched as humanity rose from nothing to challenge the most powerful species in existence. And now, humanity had the chance to shape the galaxy. The Federation's days were numbered, but the true battle had just begun. The galaxy was a canvas, and humanity was ready to paint it with their own colors, their own vision. The Zartok's warning still echoed in Alara's mind. They had made enemies, but humanity had proven something no one could deny. They had earned their place, and they weren't about to let anyone take it from them. As they boarded the Vanguard once more, Alara turned toward the stars, the distant galaxies, and the unknown challenges that awaited them. The future was theirs to shape. "We've only just begun," Alara whispered to herself, her voice carrying a quiet but unshakable conviction. "This galaxy will bow before humanity." Vanguard drifted through the void like a silent sentinel, its hull scarred, its engines weary, but its spirit unbroken. Inside, the crew moved with a focused calm, like warriors savoring a brief breath between battles. The galaxy outside was no longer the same, and neither were they. Humanity had carved its name into the stars. But with that name came a shadow. As Alara stood alone at the observation deck, the galaxy stretched before her like a tapestry of ancient secrets. Nebulas shimmered in violet swirls. Distant systems pulsed softly, faint heartbeats in the endless dark. She watched them for a long time, letting the enormity of it settle in. Humanity had risen, but the galaxy had not bowed. Not yet. Behind her, the doors slid open. Juno stepped in without a word, carrying a datapad. His expression was grim, an unspoken weight pressing down on every step. Alara didn't turn. "Say it." Juno exhaled slowly. New transmissions came through the relay, multiple ones. Alara's reflection in the glass hardened. "From who?" "Everyone." Juno approached beside her, placing the datapad between them. Lines of encrypted text and distorted holograms flickered across the screen. "The Rahl are mobilizing fleets. The surviving Federation cells have regrouped under new leadership. The Zardok have sent scouts into human-controlled space. The Tesserans are watching." Juno's voice softened. "And there's something else." He tapped the screen. A new symbol appeared, one neither of them recognized. A spiral of black and crimson, rotating slowly like an eye opening. "Who are they?" Alara murmured. Juno shook his head. "We don't know, but the transmission said one thing." He hesitated. "We saw you defy the Federation. We saw you crush the Zardok. We know what you are becoming. Ilara's jaw tightened. A threat. No, Juno whispered. A rival. Silence hung between them, heavy, electric. The galaxy wasn't preparing for peace. It was preparing for humanity. Ilara finally stepped back from the glass, her eyes burning with the steady fire that had carried her through every battle until now. Let them come. Her voice was soft, but it carried through the room like a tectonic shift. Let every empire, every species, every forgotten power test us. Humanity has crawled through extinction, clawed its way through tyrants, crushed armies, destroyed gods, and shattered chains. She walked past Juno, each step echoing like a war drum. We survived our own collapse. We survived psychic warlords. We survived the galaxy's strongest, and we're still here. Juno followed her with a faint, fierce smile. So what now, Commander? Ilara paused at the doorway, turning just enough for the shadows to frame her face in steel and fire. Now, a slow smile formed. Now we make the galaxy regret underestimating us. The vanguard shifted to battle stance. The stars trembled. A new era began. Humanity was no longer the hunted. Humanity was the storm.